Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Economics Contributor Spotlight with Dr. Doris Bennett. My name is Danny Shapiro, and I'm on the marketing team here at Hawks Learning. Our speakers today are Dr. Doris Bennett of Jacksonville State University and Kelsey Gamel of Hawks Learning. Dr. Bennett has a BA in economics from Randolph-Macon Women's College and a master's and Ph.D. from the University of Alabama. She previously taught at the University of South Carolina in Spartanburg and at Converse College. She is currently at Jacksonville State University, where she has taught principles of micro and macro, intermediate micro and macro, healthcare economics, and business statistics for 33 years. As Hawks' economics subject matter expert, Kelsey oversees the development of the economics product line. Kelsey has received a master's in economics from Baylor University and has been published in the Journal of Asian Business and Economic Studies. We are excited to have Kelsey and Dr. Bennett here with us today to share their experience and insights. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please enter those into the question and answer box located on the panel, either at the top or bottom of your screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. And on that note, I will hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us. So like Danny said, we'll be talking about how we work with contributors here at Hawks. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk about Hawks for a little bit and give an overview of the economics resources that we have, and then talk about the basics of how we work with contributors. And then Doris will talk about what it's like working for us as a contributor on her end, and then her perspective on Hawks using it in the classroom after having developed the materials. And then, of course, we'll have time for any questions you may have. So Hawks, we've been around for over 40 years, but primarily in the math discipline. It's just a couple years ago that we jumped into economics. We're really excited to be able to expand into this new discipline and also develop materials that are what instructors need. So right now, what we have is we have principles of microeconomics. We have a complete courseware, which has our three-step learning path of learn, practice, and certify. We've got a robust question bank with adaptive remediation and error-specific feedback for your students. Everything we offer is interactive, engaging, and we worked really hard on making sure that it's really relevant and really focused on real-world application and just that consistent application of economics concepts so that students can connect it to their lives. And also our product is accessible everywhere. And we have a textbook coming out very soon as well. We also have a guided notebook for Principles of Micro, which is a print resource that's an ancillary material which promotes note-taking skills. Doris will talk about this quite a bit later on, but it's full of additional exercises, graphing practice, more activities, more on your own applied applications from the text, and it also focuses on that real-world application of the concepts. Obviously, you can't have micro without having macro, so this is what we're working on right now, and this will be coming soon, and we are fleshing out that full courseware for macro as well as developing a guided notebook for macro. So like I said, we're new to the econ world, and we wanted to make sure that what we're offering is not just another thing in the market, but something that actually reaches what instructors need. And so to ensure that we're doing that, everything we do is developed by educators like yourselves, and it's designed for students. We want to make sure everything we do is built by instructors like you who are on the front line with your students and know where your students are struggling and what kind of ancillary resources they would need, what kind of questions they really need help with. So we make sure everything we do is developed by educators, hence why we've got such a big focus on working with contributors. So just some quick facts about the contributor experience. We make sure that everything we do tailors to your schedules as instructors. We want to make sure that what we offer is flexible and meets your busy schedules, and we know you always have a ton going on. So all the projects we do are part-time, short-term contracts, and they're obviously done remotely. You don't need to come into the office to do anything. And we also are flexible in our schedules and our timelines to make sure that we are fitting into your schedules. And obviously everything we do, we have compensation as well. There's no such thing as a free lunch, we know. So here are some of the things that we have contributors help us with, some of the projects that go into developing a new resource. So of course, obviously you got to start out with the research and visioning, and this is some of that I was hitting on earlier. We want to make sure what we're developing and what we're offering is something new and something that's actually needed in the market and something that hits on pain points that instructors have and issues that students often run into. So we do a lot of research and visioning and market research before we jump into anything, and you instructors help us out with that a lot. We also have contributors help us with the table of contents, making sure that we're hitting on all the main things that need to be covered, making sure that it's organized in a way that makes sense for how you structure your classes. For instructional content, we have contributors both author and enhance our content as well as update it. As you know, with macro, the data is constantly changing, so we want to make sure that what we're offering is as relevant and up-to-date as possible. So we work with contributors to do those kind of projects with our content. We also work with contributors to develop assessments. We've got a robust question bank with full tutoring components that can be used in multiple different ways, including homework, quizzes, and tests. And then we also do a few other things with contributors, that focus groups, just to kind of hear what you're needing and what we could possibly be doing next. We also have surveys and reviewer projects to go through our materials that we already have and make sure if anything we can update, anything we could change. And then we also do some customized customer projects as well if there's a specific thing you need that we don't currently meet. So then for the contributor experience, here's just a brief overview of how this works. Doris will talk a little bit more about her experience, but every project we do, we start out by building a full packet with information to give background on why we're doing this project, to give examples of what we are looking for, as well as we always have a sample as well and a template. So we're not expecting you to just create something out of thin air, but we always make sure that we show you and walk you through what exactly we're looking for, a sample, and somewhere to start from. We also do an online training to walk through all of that and answer any questions you might have. Then we do a mutually agreed upon contract. And then as you're working on the project, we have consistent and supportive feedback. There's almost always someone available to respond to you immediately. And we wanted to make sure that this contributor projects are a partnership between us and you, and making sure that everything we do is meaningful and helpful for your students. So we're always there to either provide feedback or answer any questions you may have, or brainstorm through something if we're trying to figure out a solution to something. We're always there and available to help. And then we have ongoing opportunities. As you'll find out in a minute, Doris has helped us with a lot of different things. And we're constantly going back to her and offering her more projects because she does such a great job and we enjoy working with her. And so we are consistently building things up and consistently have new projects or new ideas or new ways we can expand what we have. And so we always have something cooking. Now I'll hand it over to Dr. Bennett.
Okay, let's see. I'm sharing my screen. PowerPoint's coming up. Okay. Can you hear now?
Yes, Dr. Bennett, we can hear you and see your screen.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I was really pleased to be asked to share my experiences, and thank you, Kelsey, for the kind words. I've had the opportunity to work on 5 different projects with Hawks. I did my first project, I had answered a survey, and Kelsey and Laura contacted me about doing a review of micro objectives for part of the micro book. So that was my first project. That was back last spring, a year ago. I worked on the micro guided notebook that Kelsey talked about a minute ago, and lesson enhancements that I'll explain later for micro and macro. And then I did some of the chapter projects for the micro. So most everything I've worked on has been micro because, of course, that has been developed first, and macro is still in the works. So what I want to do is first talk about, from the contributor's perspective, the things that the projects have in common. And then I want to tell just a little bit about each of the different projects. So things that they have in common, projects start out with an overview from Hawks about the goal of the project, the nature of it, and to see if you as a contributor would be interested in participating. And if you are interested, then shortly after that, a contract with details, more details about the project, and the contributor packet you'll receive those. And one thing about the contract, it of course tells in detail the kind of contribution, the kind of content that they're looking for, but it also has a timeline. And the timeline might be 5 days for the objectives overview was a short project, or it could be as long as 2 weeks, which the micro notebook, my contributions for that went over a 2-week period. And in there's a milestone where after a couple of days you submit the first part of your work to Kelsey and Laura, both the project managers, and oversee and give you feedback, and they'll either let you know you're on the right track or make gentle suggestions for improvements. There, as Kelsey said, templates and examples for all of the projects so that you don't have to invent something out of thin air. And there's quick feedback if you're working on, say, on the guided notebook. That was a longer, the 2-week, that was a 2-week contract. And so after 2 days, I submitted 2 lessons, and probably within an hour, usually, I had response in either approval or ideas for improvement. Once the project's completed, within a few days, you receive your compensation. So that's great. So let me talk just a little bit about each of the different projects, and that will give you an idea of what all Hawks Micro has to offer. My first one was to review some objectives, and that was my first introduction to Hawks. And so my first job was to go through the learning sequence of learn, practice, and certify. And I did that in business statistics because that's already been developed. The courseware is out there and up and running. And so I worked through a couple of those lessons to get used to the sequence. And then the material for the Hawks Micro principles comes from, it's heavily based on OpenStack's Micro Principles, 2nd edition. And OpenStack's is a nonprofit organization that provides free peer-reviewed textbooks for anybody who wants to use them. And so I was not real familiar with OpenStack, so I studied the chapters that where my objectives were from. And Hawks had developed an Excel spreadsheet with the objectives for the lessons that I was to cover, and all I had to do was accept or delete or modify objectives so that they would reflect the main ideas in the lesson. For example, if maybe the OpenStack's objective just simply stated supply and demand, and that was a lesson where we're learning to find the equilibrium. So that goal would be that supply and demand is really not a goal, it's a topic. And so the goal would be modified to say, given demand and supply, find the equilibrium price and quantity. So I did that for 12 lessons. Then my next project was the micro-guided notebook. And the purpose of the notebook is to give students a printed study guide that will help them focus on the most important material in each lesson and give them practice as they read through. The first step in the learning phase is the learn, where you read as if the ebook is the textbook. And so in reading the lesson, the guided notebook almost serves as notes that a student might take. For that project, we had online training and there were templates and examples. And so I developed some different kinds of instructional content to help the students identify the important parts of the lesson and to try to put them to use as they were reading through for the first time. So some of the different kinds of things that you'll find in the notebook, each lesson starts out with a big idea, which is, of course, the main point of the chapter. And then there are lots of fill in the blank and multiple choice questions based on what's actually in the ebook text. For example, if we're studying shortages and surpluses and say equilibrium's at $6 and the textbook, the ebook might discuss, well, at a price of $4, we have a shortage of this amount. And so in the notebook, you might have a fill in the blank question. If the price is $2, then what do you have and how much is the shortage, so that students are able to put what they're reading to use right away. The microeconomics in you is a very important part of the study guide, where we try to relate what's in the chapter or in the lesson, I should say, with real world. For example, we might say, well, if we're studying shortages and surpluses, what if President Trump puts a $2 per gallon price ceiling on gasoline? Based on what we've learned in this lesson, what do you think would happen? And so that would be an example of one of our features that we use to try to engage students in the notebook. The notebook lesson ends up with a wrap-up where students will say in a sentence or two what the main point of the chapter was. Key terms are listed and the definitions given, and so the students can match those up. And then there's a test yourself with multiple choice and true false questions. So the guided notebook is very thorough. And in terms of comparing it to different projects, it was the longest contract period. I did 12 lessons in 2 weeks. So that was guided notebook. And then the content enhancement. I've done the micro and the macro content enhancement. And the OpenStax material that the Hawks micro is based on, it's very thorough, very complete, but it's pretty text heavy and very dense paragraphs. And so the main point, well, there were 2 main points, because we wanted to make sure that our content was up to date and accurate. As Kelsey was saying a little while ago, we can't be talking about GDP in 2019 and 2020 using GDP from 2012. So especially with the macro, there was a good bit of updating to have the most current data. But I think the most important part of the content enhancement was to try to pull out the main ideas and the important concepts and important relationships. And we used some instructional images like smart art. And maybe if we were talking about what happens when supply or demand changes, what happens to equilibrium price and quantity. An example would be we put each step of your process into a little colorful box, which hopefully makes that process stand out a little bit better for the students. Maybe a better example would be in the lesson about implicit and explicit cost, they're described accurately and very completely in a couple of pretty dense paragraphs. And so we took explicit cost out, put it in a little box with a definition, and then listed some examples in another box down below, and the same for implicit. So just instructional images to make the important points kind of jump out at them, I guess you'd say. And then the other important thing in the learning phase, in the ebook, we had a lot of interactives in that text. For example, if we were working on monetary policy, one interactive exercise might be I'd have build a little table and have money supply in one column, interest rates in another one, and aggregate spending in the other, and say fill in the table as to what happens to the money supply in contractionary monetary policy, what happens to the interest rate, it would increase, and then aggregate spending would decrease. And so as students read through the learn phase, they become engaged by participating in those exercises. And then we also have the engagement boxes, group activities. Maybe if we're talking about opportunity cost, we'd say get with a couple of classmates and talk about decisions that you've made and what their opportunity costs were. So those would be some things that students could do in a study group, or maybe you might even want to do that in class. Further resources were another feature in the ebook, where if we want to learn more about a topic, click on a link and see a video or read an article about that particular subject. So that's pretty much what was involved in the text enhancements. And then finally, the micro chapter projects. Purpose of the chapter project was to pull together as much of the chapter as we could and let the students put those concepts and ideas into practice. And you could do those in class if you wanted, or they could be assigned independently. One of the projects that I did was for the elasticity chapter. And so what I had $400, and I allocated that $400 among 12 different items that students might buy: microwave popcorn, soda, bottled water, Uber rides, and 8 others. And then given that initial allocation, what would you do, you the student do, if the price of those, and I increased the price of each of the items, and their job was to allocate their $400 budget with the new prices, and then figure the elasticity and classify it as elastic or inelastic, and talk about or think about what characteristics or what factors influence elasticity, like is this a necessity or a substitute, or are there many substitutes available, and then relate the elasticity to the change in total expenditures for that product. If demand worked out to be inelastic, then they're spending more. Say aspirin was one of the items. If the price went up, the quantity demanded went down just by a little bit, and so that was inelastic demand, but you're buying a little bit less but still spending more on that product. So that was my elasticity project example. And then using Hawks in classes, I can see that regardless of the kind of class you're teaching, that Hawks would be a good choice. If you're in a traditional lecture class, Then, of course, the ebook is your textbook. You can do some of the group activities in class if you like, or some of the chapter projects, even if you would like to use some class time for that. I would use the certify grade for maybe a homework grade or a quiz grade, and then you could either use the web test function that Kelsey was talking about a little while ago to make quizzes and tests. If you didn't want to use class time for quizzes and tests, then the web test would be really good for that. It's excellent because it generates a slightly different version of the question for each student. And if you're letting the students maybe have 2 tries, I usually, if it's a web test, let them have 2 tries and take the highest grade as their score. That second attempt, basically the same questions, but different numbers. Like attempt 1 might be, what's the elasticity between $2 and $3? And attempt 2 might be, okay, what's the elasticity between $8 and $9? So basically the same question, but a little bit different situation or different numbers depending on the type of question. Here at JSU, we are going to more and more blended or hybrid classes where normally in a lecture class, you would meet a total of 3 hours a week, maybe an hour and a half on Tuesday and Thursday. But with our blended classes, we only meet once a week, and then students are on their own to be learning, hopefully with online exercises, the other class day. So for this fall will be my first time to actually use Hawks in class. And so my plan is to cover, there are about 75 lessons, and I'm planning to cover about half of them and let the certified grade be half of the grade, and then I'm going to do some in-class quizzes for the other half. If you had an online class, then of course the Hawks would be everything. You would use the ebook for the textbook and do maybe certify might be your homework grade, and you could use web tests for quizzes if you want to do a quiz on a chapter and then test over several chapters. Then it's easy to set up a web test to do that. I know that the Hawks Micro will run in a learning management system, Blackboard or Canvas. We're using Canvas for the first time at JSU this fall, so I've not, since Hawks in class is new to me as well, I've not tried to incorporate the Hawks into Canvas, which is new to me, but might do that in the spring. But I know that it's possible to do it that way. And then benefits of being a contributor turned into a customer. As you make your contribution, you're studying the content. And if you're thinking about adopting a new textbook, that's a big commitment. And it's very time consuming to carefully study new material and figure out if it's a good fit for you or not. So if you're a contributor, then you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, you might say. You're making your contribution and having a good chance to review that text in detail to see if it's one you'd be interested in using. I think that the biggest benefit is the benefit to the students. For around $60, they have permanent access to the text, the ebook, and the guided notebook courses theirs to keep. And at such a reasonable price, it's great material. I think very student friendly. Students will be interested in it. And compared to the courseware and textbooks from the big publishers, right now I'm using Krugman, and I think the cheapest way to get the textbook is maybe to rent for a semester, and that's about $80. And then the courseware that they recommend, Sapling, is about $90. And of course, once the semester's over, you don't have access to that anymore. So the fact that you can get such good material at such a reasonable price is a real benefit to our students. From an instructor's point of view, it has been very easy to set up my micro principles course. Hawks will give you an instructor account, and then they make a student account for you and put you as a student in your own course. And so the last couple of months it hadn't taken that long to go through. I've done lots of other things too, but over the summer I've worked on, as if I were a student in the course, what would I encounter? And in doing that, I was able to set the course up like I wanted to fairly easily. And there are instructor and student toolkits and how-to videos at just about every turn. If you need help, all you have to do is click on, there are usually several places on every screen where you can click, and you really do get help with what you're looking for. So all that said, Hawks support is excellent. And Taylor Horde and Alex Seville and Brian Dunham have really helped me a lot, and they're always very responsive. Generally get back to you with email in almost immediately, and always within a couple of hours. I've not called support yet, but I'm sure that's as attentive as the email has been. So to sum up, I'm very pleased with Hawks, and I know that it's going to be a good fit for me and my classes, and I would encourage all of you to seriously do a demo and consider it for your classes also. So now if y'all have questions or comments.
Hi, thank you so much for that. I'll wait and see if anyone has some more questions, but while we're waiting, Dr. Bennett, what do you think has been your favorite thing about getting to contribute to the actual materials you're using rather than just being handed a textbook? What about actually getting to build it yourself has been the most helpful?
Well, when we did the enhancement for the micro and the macro, I structured things sometimes a little bit differently than what was in the original text, based on what had worked well for me in class. So that was a real advantage of being able to contribute.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, but as you see on this screen, we have our email, economics@hawkslearning.com, which you are more than welcome to send us any questions there, or if you'd like to apply to help out with one of these contributor projects, you can also reach out there as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Bennett, for your time and your contributions to this.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone else for joining. Oh wait, we just had a question actually. So I know you're starting to use in the fall. Does your semester start next week or in 2 weeks?
Does. It starts on the 21st.
Okay, we had a question about what responses you've had from students. I don't know if you haven't met with any of your students yet, so I'm not sure that you can answer that.
I haven't heard from any yet, but that's on my to-do list for tomorrow, is to always try to email a week or so ahead of time and be sure that they've got the material for the first day of class. And so I haven't done that email, and I hadn't heard back, but I would like to maybe do some surveys at the end of the semester and see what they thought. I have a feeling they'll be pleased.
Good. We have a few reviewer projects we do as well, where we'll do a survey with students at the beginning and then at the end, and students can answer some of those questions. So that's a way we can have some more of that data available going forward. For another question we had is, Dr. Bennett, if you could talk a little bit more about the interactive elements and if you were impressed with the technology that's available.
Oh yes, it's excellent. As you're going through the learn phase, there's interaction in the text that we talked about. But then when you get to the practice phase, there are questions based on the text, and students have to answer a certain % of them correct in order to go on to the certify phase, which will eventually count as their grade. And so if you miss a question or when you miss a question in practice, then you have choices of, well, see the solution, or I'm clueless, take me through step by step. So it's very interactive in a very positive way.
And we also have interactive graphing, where students actually do their answer via the graph, as well as with the practice, if you get questions wrong, you'll get targeted feedback based on how exactly a student is getting a question incorrect. We also had a question about the interactive elements embedded within the text. And there are a couple different things we have. We do have them within the e-text. One would be, we have these on your owns, where students can fill out a paragraph or respond to something that you could have students print out and bring to class as either a demonstration that they walked through it, or it can spark discussion at the beginning of class. We also have some checkbox things that are just quick, sort of like multiple choice, but renders a little differently, where students can click through different things and get immediate feedback on applying different, perhaps like, do they understand the difference between a positive and a normative statement? We have examples like that are interactive throughout the learned content. Any other questions? All right, well, you could definitely reach us at economics@hawkslearning.com with any further questions. Thank you again, everyone, for attending, and thank you, Dr. Bennett, so much for your time and your help with everything.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye-bye.